course, we also want to look ahead to next week and what we have our eye on. A live now look at the White House in Washington, D.C., as we know that President Trump will be delivering an address to a joint session of Congress come Tuesday. That's March 4th. At 9 p.m. Eastern Time. To discuss what we can expect the president to detail during this address, I'd like to bring into the conversation now political analyst and historian Rich Rubino. Rich, good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
All right, so let's start with maybe some comparisons. What do we think is going to be different about President Trump's address this time around versus his address his first time in office?
I don't think there's going to be that much differences. Donald Trump obviously has a very confrontational style. I think he'll try to directly take on the Democrats in the United States Congress. I think he will praise the Republican Party. He will talk about the Dodge cuts. I think he will certainly talk about that. I think he'll certainly talk about Ukraine. He might actually call out Mr. Zelensky again, like he certainly did on last week. But I don't think it's going to be that much different. He just has a very confrontational type of a style.
Let's talk a little bit about the Congress that he will be addressing. Are we talking about unified members of Congress? What kind of divisions are we still seeing amongst Democrats and Republicans?
It is an extreme monolith. There used to be a time when there were conservative Democrats and there were liberal Republicans. Sometimes, like, for example, with the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Lyndon Johnson got that passed with liberal Democrats and liberal Republicans against conservative Republicans and conservative Democrats. Right now, this country is essentially a monolith. If you look at, for example, the president's first budget, it was passed in the House of Representatives. The entire Democratic caucus voted against it. The entire Republican caucus voted for it, except for one Congress member, Mr. Massey of Kentucky, who believed that it did not go far enough. So we're really in this time. It's the Congress is very bifurcated, and there's very little other than minor bills and bills that you really don't hear that much about. Pieces of legislation that enjoy bipartisan support.
Now, this is called the address to Congress, but will President Trump just be speaking directly to Congress, or will he be making a wider appeal to the American public as a whole?
Yeah, it's really about 80% of this is to the American public as a whole. I think that he's not, obviously, Speaker Johnson invites him there to address the United States Congress, but most members of Congress are pretty much decided how they're going to vote on legislation. So it's really speaking to the American people, and it's really something that the president has that really, it's a tool in the toolbox that the president has that in the past has really benefited them politically. Bill Clinton, for example, right after the Monica Lewinsky scandal broke, delivered an address to the joint session of Congress. And it wasn't really necessarily that he was addressing the Congress. It was really that he was addressing the American people, talking about the economic gains that the American people had made during his administration. Consequently, the American people with about 70% support said that he should stay in office, for example. Or, you go back to some of Ronald Reagan's addresses, Barack Obama's addresses, Lyndon Johnson's addresses. They're really talking to the American people. Gerald Ford in 1975 said something that I think that you don't really hear from many presidents too often. He said the state of our union is not good. Usually the presidents get in there and they try to talk about how the state of the union is good because of them.
And Rich, later on, I will have a question about which address to Congress really stands out to you most within history. But let's get back to this topic on the wider American public. Given all of these initiatives and all of these moves that the Trump administration has brought forth throughout these last several weeks, what are some that have been considered successes amongst Americans, or also some misses?
I don't think we really had. I think it's such an early part of the administration so far. We really don't know. I will say that generally speaking, when a president comes in, both their first term and their second term, they tend to overreach. Bill Clinton, for example, Bill Clinton, for example, with his health care plan in 1993. Consequently, in 1994, the Democrats lose 53 seats in the House of Representatives, and the first time in 40 years that they no longer hold the House or the Senate. George W. Bush in his second term with partial privatization of Social Security, 2006, the party for the first time in 12 years loses the House of Representatives. Barack Obama, when he came in 2008, he delivered health care reform, which is popular today, but at the time the Affordable Care Act was not popular. And in the 2010 midterm elections, the Democrats lost 63 seats, the largest amount any party's lost since Franklin Roosevelt in 1938, who himself, by the way, probably probably overreached when he tried to pack the courts with the United States Supreme Court. So I think Donald Trump, in terms of his Dodge cuts, this may be his kind of healthcare reform or his packing the courts where he's really trying to overreaching, and that might potentially help the Democrats rather, to take over the House of Representatives and to at least make the United States Senate closer.
Now to a point of fact here, Rich, can you explain to us what the difference is between an address to Congress versus a State of the Union address?
Yes, and it's really a technicality. Technically, the presidents don't actually have to deliver the State of the Union address. They don't actually have to go there. George Washington did. John Adams did. Thomas Jefferson came in 1801, and he believed that it was too almost magisterial for a president to go up there and address them. He wanted a more humble presidency, if you will. So he did not address the United States Congress. Other presidents followed suit, all the way up to Woodrow Wilson in 1913, who did that. It's very much kind of almost an imperious view of the president. But they call it, they basically said that from time to time, the president will deliver the State of the Union, and it used to be in writing. So the president delivers a State of the Union address, but usually the first year in office, it's called the President's Address to a Joint Session of Congress. That's really a technicality. In many respects, he has not been a president for a full year, so he can't really talk about what's gone on during his administration. So that's really why it's called the President's Address to Congress. And the first time, this is actually interesting, though, because Donald Trump is the only president other than Grover Cleveland to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. So he will actually be the first president to deliver 2 addresses to the joint session of Congress, because Grover Cleveland, of course, did them in writing.
And Rich, of course, during a lot of these addresses, we do get moments that really go down in history. For example, during President Trump's first term, it's that moment where Nancy Pelosi really rips up that entire address behind him. When you look back throughout history, are there any addresses to Congress or even State of the Union addresses that really stick out to you?
Yes, a couple of them, and one of them was when Lyndon Johnson delivered an address about the Voting Rights Act in 1965 to the joint session of Congress. He said in the end, which was the anthem of the civil rights movement, he said, "And we shall overcome." And the story is Martin Luther King Jr. heard that and started crying, because he basically said that you have a president of the United States that was repeating what Martin Luther King Jr. and his co-officials had been preaching throughout the 1960s. So that was one. I think that another one would be Gerald Ford in 1975. Gerald Ford came in after Richard Nixon, and he experienced the beginning of stagflation, which is when you have high unemployment coupled with high inflation, which is not supposed to happen. And he said the state of our union is not good. That's one thing because usually the presidents try to do everything they can to kind of gloss over the problems and try to really talk about how great the economy is. Another one would be Bill Clinton in 1996. Bill Clinton was a Democrat, but he was a new Democrat who wanted to end welfare, as we know it, for example, and wanted to reinvent government. Actually, before Donald Trump, he had his own proposal to do that. And in 1996, he said, "The era of big government is over." And that, I think, was something that was more of an anthem to somebody like Newt Gingrich or Trent Lott or Bob Dole. But the fact that a Democratic president saying that, I think, was really the beginning of, it was really showed Bill Clinton showed the nation that Bill Clinton was a new Democrat and he was not a traditional Democrat. And consequently, he ended up getting reelected in almost a landslide in 1996 by really pivoting and moving to the center.
And then finally, Rich, I'd just like to ask you this, because you follow politics so closely. No shortage of headlines this week. I think the one that has really dominated was that exchange between President Trump, President Zelensky, Vice President, J.D. Vance in the Oval Office. But were there any other storylines that you were following that maybe you think we need to keep a close eye on going forward? Something that didn't technically make such a big splash?
Yes, and I think that one thing that I think is very interesting is Mitch McConnell is not running for re-election to a Senate seat in Kentucky. He served for 18 years. He's really, no matter what you think of him, he really is a giant in terms of being able to maintain control of the Republican Party. Really, for 18 years, no United States senator has led their party for a longer period of time. It'll be interesting to see who runs to succeed him. Congressman Massey is somebody who is very much considering running. He's somebody who's very much to the right of the MAGA movement, very much to the right of the Trump movement. And the other one you'd have to watch is the state of Florida. where there will be where the governorship of Florida, Ron DeSantis, is term limited, cannot run again. Congressman Byron Donalds has announced that he's going to be running, he's going to be running for the governorship of Florida. Donald Trump is very much supportive of him. Ron DeSantis criticized his role when he was in the legislature, saying he was spending too much time out campaigning around the country, and potentially he could support his wife Casey DeSantis if she chooses to run. So you could see really a battle royale, or you could see a proxy fight between Donald Trump supporting Congressman Donalds and Ron DeSantis supporting his wife. And it's very similar to, I think, the rivalry they had in the last election, but when they both ran against each other. So it may not be as much unity between Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump as you may think.
Rich Rubino, a political analyst and historian. Of course, we always appreciate your time here at Live Now from Fox, and specifically speaking on, Senator Mitch McConnell. I remember showcasing live when he made that speech on the Senate floor, and he even had a standing ovation. And a good point there, also reminding us to watch out for these Florida politics, because there's a lot happening there. But Rich, thanks so much. We'll talk soon.